So we're continuing here on Daf Ayin Beis, Amud Beis, and we had what we thought was a contradiction between two Rambams, and the Ravid points this out. So let's go over what we did yesterday, at least the last part of yesterday's discussion with regard to the Rambam. Now, the basic issue that we're trying to understand is whether or not an object, an inanimate object, can become a Rodef. And the case that the Rambam addresses, we'll see in a minute, in the 8th parak of Chovel Mazik, is where there's an object that's very weighty, and it's weighing down a boat, and it threatens to bring the boat down. And somebody, and we'll ask the question whether somebody is a good Samaritan or the opposite, somebody takes that very heavy object, that weight, and throws it overboard. And the question is he doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and can he be sued or not? So the Rambam writes, this is Perek Ches Milchus Chovel U'Mazik. I think, John, you had it opened yesterday, right? Halacha Tesvav. And then we'll go back to the beginning of that Perek. Sfina shechoshva lishover mikoved hamasui. So this ship is in a very precarious state because of the overload. The Omad Echad Mehem, and one of the members of the ship stood up. Vehekel mimasav v'shlich biyam. He took that very heavy object. What would be a good example of like very heavy merchandise, on a boat? Can you think of any example? I don't know. Nothing comes to mind right now. Anyway, so he throws it overboard. Potter, the owner of that very heavy object, that merchandise, cannot sue him for damages, even though he took it physically and he threw it overboard. Shamasa sheba kamo rodef. The Rambam says that physical object, that inanimate but heavy object, is a rodef. Rodef achreim lahargam. It's endangering the lives of anyone on the ship. U'mitzvah rabba asa. He's a good Samaritan, and not only is he parted from damages, but we should also give him shishi. He deserves a special honor and decorations. Shehishlich v'hoshiyam, that he threw it overboard and saved their lives. And the Ravid's not happy. The Ravid quotes the Gaon, and he says the following. Very strange, very cute language of the Ravid. He says, "Ein kan lo melech v'lo tavlin." There's no salt and there's no spices here. It's tasteless, I guess you'd say. She'ein kan din rodef klal. So Rav Soloveitchik understood that the Ravid objected to a certain leap of faith of the Rambam. The Rambam's leap of faith is that even an inanimate object can be considered a rodef. And that's called a rodef b'shei v'altaseh. Wherever the person is, or in this case, the object is threatening someone else's life, even though the person or the object is doing nothing. I mean, you could imagine, and probably this came up during the Holocaust, where a person's presence, this very presence, is endangering the life of everyone else. Like the Gemara has a case where Ben Bichri, we'll talk about it maybe later on today or tomorrow or next time, that they were after him and they were going to raise the entire city to the ground because of this one person. So the question is, are you allowed to take that person and give him up in order to save everyone else? Does he have the status of a rodef? And we'll see later on whether we can make a comparison, an analogy to the case of the fetus when, through the birth process, it is endangering the life of the mother. The fetus itself, in this particular scenario, is passive. It's shevi altas. So here's where we have l'chora, a machlokas between the Rambam and the Ravid, whereas the Rambam would hold that this object even though it's shevi al taseh, it's not actively involved in what we call a maisa redifa, but nevertheless it's considered like a rodef, as opposed to the Ravid sheet who says no. A rodef is a din that is applied to a maisa redifa, a person, or maybe even an object, but the object and the person have to be active. Okay, but leaving out the Ravid from him, let's just focus on the Rambam. The Rambam in that same chapter, Perek Ches Milchas Chovel Umazik, this time instead of Halacha Tesvav, we're going to go back to Halacha Daled. The Rambam paskins that Nasam Mamon Chavero Biyado. So the government is demanding a certain object of value. They want to confiscate it. The king wants to confiscate it, and he sends his, one of the members of his officer crew, and that officer comes and says, "I want this object." V'nosno lanos. So again, the object belongs to Reuven. The government, the king, is after it. He wants it. And Shimon comes along and he offers the messenger, the officer of the king, that object. He picks it up and gives it over to him. He transfers it over to him. And the Rambam writes, Chayav l'shalem, afal pisha melech onso lahavi. Even though the king was threatening, if you don't give me this, I'm going to take my anger out on this whole community or whatever it might be. And the Rambam says he has to pay for that. Who's paying? Again, Shimon is paying because he hands over the object of Reuven to an anos. Anos means the officer representing the king who is compelling the Jews to give up whatever the king wants them to give up. And the Ravid on that particular Rambam, Perek Ches Halacha Daled, writes, Gam bazeh al derech harav hu holech v'ein agon modelo. So again, I don't know what it means, al derech harav hu holech. I suspect he means the Rimi Gash, who is the Rebbe of the Rambam. But before the Rimi Gash, there was a Gon. I'm not sure who he means, Rav Saja Gon, Rav Hai Gon. I'm not sure which Gon. V'ein agon modelo. And the Gon would not admit and accept this halacha that you have to pay for an object that's been singled out by the Malchus, and you went ahead and handed it over, even though it belongs to someone else. V'chein b'din, and now the Ravid takes sides in the issue, and he agrees with the Gon. She'ein lecha davar she'omed b'pnei pikuach nefesh. We're in a situation of pikuach nefesh, because mind you, if you don't satisfy the will of the king, we don't know what destruction he's going to wreak on the entire community. Ume'ayin yischayev lo zeh sheyomus b'shvil maman chavero. He says, how could it be that according to the Rambam, he becomes financially responsible for the loss of this object when the other option is to die? So me'ayin yischayev lo zeh sheyomus, that this person, let's call him Shimon again, right? He's the one who handed over the Reuven's property, that he should die b'shvil maman chavero in order to protect the monetary ownership and possession of Reuven. Holvi yichtalo b'ferish. Now it's quite clear here, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the Melech wants this particular object. You could almost create a whole, you could produce a movie about this. There's a special diamond. All these movies where there's always a special diamond. It's like only one in the whole world. It's the largest diamond in the world, or it belonged to the queen. You know what I mean? I mean, like, what would you pay to get a set of drums that was owned by Ringo of the Beatles? You know what I mean? So that's what I want. He wants that. You guys are too young. You never heard of the Beatles. But anyway, so in this case, Yichtolo Beferish. It's not like, we could have offered something else, what we call in Hebrew a pitzui. Let me buy you out and redeem it. I'll give you $1,000. I'll give you $100,000. Just don't take my friend's, very rare, precious, antique gold ring or whatever it is. No. That's not even a possibility here. That's not an option. The Melech wants that object. There's a special stamp on that object. So the only alternative is to give up your life. If you don't want to cough it up, then it's pikuach nefesh mamish. So it's very interesting because, in the Ravid in Halacha Tezayin that we learned, there, the Ravid was of the opinion that the object which is weighing very heavily and weighing down the boat, threatening to sink the ship, there the Ravid was, who says that it's a Rodef? Why should an object be called a Rodef? It's Shevi Altas. And therefore don't think you can get away with this. You'll be responsible here. But in the very same l'chora identical set of issues, where you have the Malchus that's interested in one particular object or else, and here the Rav is saying, yeah, you got to give it to him. I mean, that's what he wants. And although you should in general protect the possessions of your friend, but not in this case, because you're going to die. So here the Ravid is advocating against in both cases he's arguing against the Rambam, but in like two different directions. Because the Rambam himself is in two different directions, right? In the case of the Masui, the Rambam is of the opinion that it's a Rodef. And go ahead and destroy it, throw it overboard. In the case of the object that was singled out by the Anos representing the king, there the Rambam's opinion is you're going to have to pay for that if you hand over the object. But if you look from the Ravid's perspective, everything is topsy-turvy, just the opposite. The Ravid, in the case of throwing something overboard that's weighing down the ship, there the Ravid says, no, there's no din of Rodef. You're going to have to pay for that. But in the case where the king has designated something and he wants that or who knows what, give it to him, and you're not even responsible financially to replace it. So this is where we got up to yesterday, and we left it as a cliffhanger. So let me, if you don't mind, suggest a possible approach here, and then I have here some writings in the name of Rav Soloveitchik. I don't know if they're along our lines or along a different lines. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to see that. I'm just thinking, so to speak, out of the box. The Rambam Shita is that a Rodef, in a case of an inanimate object, there's got to be something about the object, like the object that's in it. Let me say it this way: the object in and of itself is a dangerous object, as it is now. It's like a bomb that's ticking away. It's going to explode. It's going to bring down the ship. That's a Rodef. But says the Rambam, if the Melech has decided that he wants an object, and if he doesn't get it, we're in if we don't cough it up and deliver it, we're in big trouble. There's nothing that you could say about, you cannot describe the object as endangering anyone's life. The one who's endangering someone's life is the king. But when you have a boat, the weight of merchandise on the boat is endangering the boat. Again, in normal conditions, if maybe if there were no storm winds or whatever, then the boat would survive. But under these conditions, the weight is battling against the boat. You could almost say the following: the weight of this heavy object is an anti-gravitational force, or maybe you can call it a gravitational force. It's pulling the boat down. Again, we're not dealing with guilt. Nobody's blaming the object. The object is inanimate. It's not responsible for any of its actions. But in and of itself, the Rambam holds you can classify it as a Rodef, because it is actually pulling, if you follow what I mean, it's pulling the boat down. Mashen came in the case of Halacha Daled, there we said that the object is not endangering the life. It's the desire of the king and his demand to get that object because he wants it. He wants it, to put it up in his palace. That's what's endangering the life. So you cannot define the object, as unique as it might be, as desirable it might be, as a rodef. It's a beautiful object in and of itself. If it was on auction, it would go for billions, and it's not a rodef. But a heavy object on a boat is a rodef. The Ravid, on the other hand, is not willing to accept that a heavy object on a boat is a rodef because we need a Maisa Redifa. But he nevertheless maintains, like the Gaon, that in the case of Halacha Daled, once the king has designated and earmarked that object that he wants, then there's no element of a mazik here. Why? Because a mazik is someone who crosses the bounds of that which is legal, and had he come in front of the Chacham and asked us what to do, the Chacham would have instructed him, don't you dare touch an object that belongs to someone else and endanger its existence. But here, if he come in front of the rabbi would say, of course, no doubt about it. You have to hand over that object, because otherwise, if you're going to maintain and defend the possession and the ownership of that object, of Ploni Almoni, then we're going to die. So it's mamish pikuach nefesh. And the Ravid is of the opinion that if you would get a hora to destroy someone's object, which, as paradoxical as that sounds, then Adarabah, you'd be obligated to destroy that object. Now, again, I would say that we have, I think, again, not to take credit for it, but maybe we have a halfway mark of success, and we can explain the Machlokas, the Ram, and the Ravid, and Halacha Tezvav. That yes, in the case of the weighty object. But what I don't understand is the Rambam Shita in the case of the object that's desirable and is being demanded by the king. I mean, the Rambam knows very well that the Horas Chacham would be that rather than die, you hand over that object. But apparently, the Rambam holds that there's a halacha called Adam HaMazik. And again, whether or not you're allowed to destroy someone else's property, that's a moral question. But on a financial issue, on a Choshe Mishpat level, in terms of Dinei Nezikin, if you destroyed his object, you have to pay for that. You want to know whether you're allowed to? Okay, the circumstances may be very extreme, in which we have to allow you to violate the Isur Lo Tigzol or Lo Tamid al Damriacho, whatever Isur might be involved in destroying someone's property. But even if we give you the green light and you're allowed to destroy someone's property, you should know you'll have to pay for that. You are a mazik. I mean, there's no one can deny that you destroyed his object. Again, you didn't actually destroy it, you gave it over to the honest, but that's equivalent to destroying the object. You have to pay for that. So whereas the Ravid understood that Chiyuv Tashlim and Ezekiel is all based on the fact that you were immorally and illegitimately, illegally destroying someone else's object. But he has Pikuach Nefesh. And the Ravid holds Pikuach Nefesh is on the level of, are you doing a Dover Mut, are you doing Dover Asa, but it has no bearing on the halach of Choshe Mishpat. I'll give you an example. Let's say because of Pikuach Nefesh, we would allow you to steal something. All right, stealing is a lav in the Torah. I'm not going to make light of it. But like all other lavim in the Torah, like Shatnez and like Shabbos, it all gets overridden and trumped by Pikuach Nefesh. So we're going to allow you to steal something. Are you going to pay for that? The answer is yes. He stole his object. Give it back. Lomi boy, if the object is intact, then for sure you have to give it back. Even if the object was destroyed, give it back the object. You don't have the object, pay its value. So there are two different dinim here, says the Rambam. One is a moral issue in terms of, am I allowed to violate the law? Can I destroy someone's property or not? Am I a tzaddik or am I chas v'shalom the opposite? Then that's one level. But there's another level of dini momenos, and in dini momenos, a mazik has to pay. He has to compensate for the loss if he was the one who destroyed it. So as fate would have it, you were the one in the position to destroy this object by giving it over to the anas. Okay, now pay for it. And that's the Rambam sheet. So just to summarize, what we're suggesting is that there are two different issues here and a double machlokus on two counts. And they sound similar, but they're really not to be analogized. There's no analogy. One machlokus is whether you can have a din of a rodef to an inanimate object, whereas the Rambam would say yes, and the Ravid says no. The Ravid stands on the fact that you need a meiser redifa. There's no meiser redifa in an inanimate object. And now there's another issue, and that is what's the relationship between moral heter or iser as opposed to a chiv mazik as dinei momenos. And the Ravid says that the chiv mazik to pay tashlumi nezikin is contingent, is dependent upon the moral halachic issue of whether or not you did the right thing or the wrong thing. And the Rambam, on the other hand, holds no. They're two separate worlds. There's one world about whether you're allowed to destroy someone's property or you're not. And there's another world about whether you have to pay for it. So let's just see what we have here. Yesh Loma, the Hassam, in the case of the heavy load that's on the boat, Hamasa Nasa Rodef Me'elov, which I think is going to be a problem for the Ravid, but the Rambam holds that in and of itself, it's a Rodef. Its weight is threatening to bring down the ship. V'azai, im matzil atzmo yidei hashlochas hamasa, ve'ibud momon chavero. Therefore, says the Rambam, that if he kills the rodef, so to speak, meaning he takes the object and he gets rid of it in order to save himself, because he's now the nirdav, and for that matter, anyone in the boat is the nirdav, is then he's not chayiv in tashlumin. Why? Because the object is defined as a rodef, even though again there's no kuvase, it's shevi altase, it's a rodef me'elo. And this reminds me, I think, if that's what the Rav might have in mind, of the halacha called Gavra Ktila Kakotil. Meaning, when the Baba Machteres breaks Kalim, he doesn't have to pay for those Kalim because he's Chayav Misa at that point. Maybe that's not such a great analogy. I don't know. But I'll tell you what I meant to say, and I didn't say it as well, and I apologize, is that he's chayiv misa and he's a gavra ketila. So a rodef has the status of a gavra ketila. Hence, you're allowed to kill the rodef and even obligated to do so. In the case of the masa in the ship, the Rambam holds that if this masa has the status of a rodef, then it's like a gavra ketila. It has no value, perhaps. Oh. But now we get to the case of the Anos. The Anos says, give me that object that belongs to Ruvain or I'll kill you. Is Ein HaMomen Atzmo Rodef? Oh, I think that's what he may be taking us during. Remember we said that is the object with its weight actually pulling something down such that the object, even in a state of passivity, is a Rodef? Or is it the Anos is the Rodef? The Ein HaMomen B'Atzmo HaRodef. The Rav is adding another beautiful piece. This didn't even cross my mind. He's saying that the lives of the people are in danger. That's called the Nirdov. But who is the Rodef? So the Rav is saying you have two choices, and you have to choose one and not the other. Either Rodef is that object, which is so desired by the king, or the king himself is the Rodef. He's the one who's threatening your life. And the Rambam holds that ha'anos hu Rodef. It's dafka the anos and not the object that the anos so desperately desires. Hashem Rodef she bagavra, meaning of the anos, mafkias Hashem Rodef milochel b'mamon. So the moment that he desires, he wants the Mona Lisa, that's not a Rodef because we already have a Rodef. We can identify the Rodef who's actually physically, but threatening to kill us. And once you identify the Rodef, then no other object in the world could be a Rodef. You've got only one shot at the plate. And therefore, since we identify the Anos as the Rodef, therefore, the moment itself that he desires, we call it the Mona Lisa, that is not a Rodef. And the halacha that we said before, that the object, once it's a Rodef, it doesn't have any value, it's a Gavra Ketila, and therefore you don't have to pay if you destroy it, that doesn't apply over here because the object is not a Gavra Ketila, the object is not a Rodef. We already have a Rodef. And this reminds me, if you allow me to, think about a chiddush of Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim says that if Ruvain threatens Shimon to allow himself to be thrown on a baby and crush the baby by his weight, says Reb Chaim, Shimon doesn't have to give up his life. Even though Retzach, killing, is one of the three averos for which you have to give up your life. Says Reb Chaim, in this case, he's not a Rotzeach. There is a Rotzeach. The one who's going to throw him off the third-story ledge onto the baby, and he is now like a cannonball, or call it a bullet, that's being thrust. The one who's thrusting him, his own physical body and his weight onto the baby, the one who throws him is considered the Rotzeach. And you can only identify one Rotzeach. You don't have the option of two. So it's either the Jew who allows himself to be thrown, and his physical body and its weight will crush the baby, or it's the one who threw him. And Reb Chaim says for sure it's the one who threw him. And once we identify the one who threw him as the Rotzeach, then he himself is being thrown, he's not a Rotzeach. And here too, the Anos is interested in one particular possession, but it's not that possession that is the Rodef, but rather the Anos himself. Mashenke b'masa shebasfina hamasa atzmo havi rodef v'shemochi potu mitashlum. So again, we're always coming down, according to the Rav's approach, to one question, whether the masa is a rodef or is not a rodef. I thought we were entering into a whole nother world when we got to the case of the anos, and that is whether the heter to give up someone else's mammon based on pikuach nefesh v'chayben, when that is enough to be poter him from mammon. The Rav is not on that line at all. The whole sugya from soup to nuts revolves around this question of whether or not the object itself, the physical object, is a rodef. And the Rambam is of the opinion that if there's a human intervention here, and it's the human being who's going to kill the person, chas v'shalom, then the object is not a rodef. But if it's the inherent weight of the object, and there's no person that could be called a rodef, then that piece of masui, of mammon, is not worth a dime. It's a rodef, it's like a gavra ketila, and destroy it. Kol hakodim zoch. Umevur barama, the Rambam sover the chal din rodef b'masa afal pishu rodef b'shevi altas. Oh, now the Rav is getting back to our sugya. Beautiful. According to the Rambam, that even a physical object, which is shevi altase, could be called a rodef, then what would you say about the ubar? The ubar is a passive rodef. The ubar is threatening the life of its mother. He says, "V'tzarich iyun, maishna rodef." In the case of masa, may ubar sheyotza rosho, because ubar sheyotza rosho is now endangering the life of the mother, just like the masa with its weight is endangering the people who are on the ship. And again, the shame rodef allows you to destroy the rodef. In the case of the masa, we've defined the masa as a rodef, destroy the rodef. But in the case of the ubar, we're not going to destroy the ubar, even though it's a rodef. No, you'll say, what do you mean a rodef? The uber is not doing anything. Is the uber doing a maisa redifa? The uber is just being thrust out of its mother's womb. But the answer is no. We don't need a maisa. We don't need an active rodef for the maisa redifa. Even Shevi Altas said in the case of Masu, you already proven that the Rambam holds to such a thing as a Shem Rodef for Shevi Altas. If that object is endangering the life of other people, it becomes a Rodef, and therefore it's valueless. Just destroy it. Why shouldn't the Uber be called a Rodef? Umayshna Uber shalo yatsa rosho li Uber sheyatsa rosho. If the Uber is a Rodef, then to the same extent that you could kill the Uber to save the mother, in the case where the Uber has not exited from its mother's body, it didn't pop its head out. So even after it pops its head out, it is still a Rodef, because it's threatening the life of its mother. Even though, again, there's no active Redifa, but the Rambam doesn't require active Redifa. Well, this is heavy. And I think even without getting into any deep analysis here and create new classifications and categories, I think we have to say that min hashamayim karad filei. The problem is that if mishamayim karad filei means that this is the natural way of the cause and effect in the universe, then the same thing should apply in the case of the masa. And the Mishnah, which the Gemara quotes, says, Ein dolchin nefesh b'fnei nefesh. But that doesn't help us much, because if one nefesh is a rodef, then we are dolchin nefesh b'fnei nefesh. Now, Reuven's running after Shimon. We're going to kill Reuven and save Shimon, even though Ein dolchin nefesh b'fnei nefesh, because Reuven is a rodef. Now, in the case of the birth, the Rambam seems to assume that before the baby is born, it's a rodef. Hence, we kill it to save the mother. But for some reason, after it's born and it pops its head out, it's no longer a rodef. Well, why not?
To me, in that second case, the mother's a rodef as well, because she's threatening the life of the ubar.
In what sense? I mean, the uber is perfectly healthy as far as I know and very well protected, unless we step in and intervene and kill the uber. The uber is doing well,
Right. So I mean, that's how I
feel distress. I don't know, but
right, but that's how I would envision it, is because he's a threat to the mother. The mother, because of her condition, is now like a threat to him.
Honestly, Steve, I don't chop that yet. Let me give me time to let it. If you said it, it must be right. But I'm trying to see if I could sink into my brain, because I thought that if we do nothing, the mother's going to die. So she's not threatening the life of the ubar. The ubar is going to survive. But now you're saying no, that the mother is threatening the life of the ubar. I don't see that offhand. Give me a little time. Maybe over Shabbos I'll figure out what you mean. Unless you want to add something. I don't, right now it's not going in. Maybe you can say the following. The fact that the threat that the uber poses to the mother is natural is a mitigating circumstance, but only when we're dealing with a nefesh. What do I mean? In the case of a masa, I don't have any rachmanis on the masa. All I'm interested in, this is top of my list, is the fact that the masa is dragging down the ship and endangering the lives of those on the ship. And there's no point in time where the masa, this very heavy merchandise, is not endangering there's no transition period here. Just tell me whether the masa is a rodef or not. The Rambam Shita is you could have a rodef b'shevi altas. So the element of guilt, you remember we discussed whether rodef needs asra or not, and therefore would a rodef be chayiv misa? Once we use those terms of chayiv misa with regard to a rodef, then a moral element enters into the picture, meaning is there guilt or is there not guilt? So as long as you're talking about an inanimate object that doesn't have the status of a human being, or for that matter, it doesn't have the status of a nefesh in legal terms, according to halacha, then we can call it a rodef. We have to destroy it and save the lives of those who are near them. But In the case of the uber, there's going to be a moment of transition. Before it pops its head out, it's an inanimate object, so to speak. It doesn't have the status of a nefesh. And since its reality is endangering the life of the mother, as it is, then it's a rodef. And there is such a thing as a rodef without a meiser redifa. So here we don't introduce any moral elements. But once the baby's head pops out, now we have a whole nother picture. We no longer see the baby as an inanimate object, as a chefts, if you will, an object that is threatening the mother, but now it has the status of a nefesh. And here, all those halachas that we spoke about, about chiyuv misa, could kick in. To such an extent that there's one man the Omer that says, against Rav Huna, that a rodef needs asra. Now, again, I'm not sure if what I'm saying can be reconciled with Rav Huna, because Rav Huna says that a rodef does not need a hasra. So that's an issue. Let me just very quickly, what time is it? It's 11:30. Just if you give me 2 or 3 more minutes, he says the following. Yesh shnei dinim b'harigas rodef. Din de bikuach nefesh al nirdof, shemate largos harodef mishum atzolos had nirdof, and base din chiyuv misa. I think he's going along our direction, that there's a transition here with the birth of the baby in which we need another condition to be fulfilled in order to consider the ubar a rodef, and that's going to be a chiyuv misa. V'nira, shemitzad din atzolos had nirdof, lefken afkamina bein rodef, v'shevi al tasel rodef al yidei maisa. So if you're talking about saving the nirdof, it's irrelevant as to whether the rodef was this kind of rodef or that kind of rodef. Mashenkin din chiyuv misa the rodef. Chal dafka al rodef she rodef es chaver b'kuv aseh. Oh, beautiful! Much better than what I said. I thought it had to do with the shave nefesh and moral obligation. The Rav is saying something totally different. The Rav is saying that we come back to square one and we ask ourselves: is there such a thing as a rodef b'shevi altas? And the answer is the following: that as far as Hatzolas HaNirdof is concerned, it doesn't matter whether the rodef is b'maiser redif or b'shevi altas. But when we get to the second halach of chiyuv misa, then we're going to redefine our rodef as someone who is b'kuv vaseh. Otherwise, there's no chiyuv misa. It's not that far from what I said. All right, anyway. Omnam v'nogelu ubar dahavi rodef b'shevi altas. The horgano so midin atzos hanidav yesh chiluk bein yotzer rosha lo yotzer rosha. Dikshe yotzer rosho azai ein doche nefesh b'nei nefesh. The my causes the domati doch sumik play do. V'rak v'kotan ha rodef es chavero dahavi rodef b'kuv vaseh azai chal of din chiyuv misa the rodef. In Horgin ha'ubar sheyotzer rosha davi rodef b'shevi altas. All right, we're going to have to go over this again and again. So I'm going to leave it here. Wish you all a great Shabbos. But at some point, we're going to differentiate between 2 categories of rodef. We have to figure out the nuances here. But there's going to be a rodef where it makes no difference whether you shevi altas or kum vaseh, and that's going to be before the baby is born. But after the baby is born, when we want to introduce what's called a chiyuv misa, then we need a rodef b'kuv vaseh. And we're going to say here that since the baby is just being thrust out of its mother's womb and endangering life, that's called a rodef b'shevi altas. And the Rambam is only willing to apply the Rodef B'Shevi Alta said before the baby is born. But once you have a baby that's born, then we need Kumvaseh. And if you'll ask me from Katan or Rodef Afar Chavera, there it's a Rodef Kumvaseh. Okay then. This is exciting. I mean, it's very deep sugisi. All right, have a great Shabbos, and Emir Hashem, we'll get together on Yom Rishon. Thank you so much.